Hello and welcome to World Talks here on TVP World. I'm your host Benjamin Lee, and please join me and my guest on this next interview. Europe's security landscape is evolving rapidly. Ukraine's wartime government reshuffle, closer Franco-German defense cooperation, and growing concern over Russian hybrid threats all point to a contingent preparing for a prolonged period of confrontation. Joining us today on TVP World to examine what these developments mean for Europe's future is Velina Tchakarova, founder of the FACE geopolitical consultancy. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Thank you for the invitation.
Now, we're looking at all these developments this week, from Kyiv's government to reshuffle to closer Franco-German relations. Do we read this as a broader shift in European defense strategy, or should we be looking at this in isolation?
Well, first we have to differentiate a little bit. The political reshuffle in Ukraine is not the first one, probably it's not going to be the last one, and it has created already certain waves of public discontent, especially when it comes to the change of the defense minister, who has been very popular. So political reshuffle is more linked to power centralization, to, let's say, political management, because Zelenskyy needs to keep in check, of course, his ministers. He has to make sure that there is a certain governance preparation for what will come next. And what will come next is, of course, severe winter, as the last one which we had, and which obviously Ukraine also wants to prevent, or let's say be better prepared for. That is probably the main role of the new prime minister. But there is also more to it. When it comes to the strategy of Europe, which is at the core of your question, of course, here it is about certain decision making that's linked to the military aid for Ukraine, that's linked also to defense initiatives, which obviously come from countries like France and Germany, but also from the so-called coalition of the willing. And I think that the most important takeaway from this week was actually linked to the decision to start working on an anti-ballistic missile program that is going to be produced in Ukraine.
All right, now mentioning the coalition of the willing, this meeting took place pretty much right after the NATO meeting in Ankara, and then now we see another deepening of Franco-German military cooperation as well. Are these a continuation of the discussion after the NATO summit, or are they running parallel somehow?
This is definitely a continuation of what happened during the NATO summit, where obviously Ukraine was also a very important topic, and a major part will be linked, of course, to the, let's say, the funds that will be dedicated to Ukraine's defense programs. As we know right now, the drone program is already running quite successfully, and now, of course, what Ukraine is missing urgently is anti-ballistic missile program. There are two important but different tracks, and the one is linked more to the European support, which is why we have to differentiate again a little bit, because it doesn't have to do with the NATO summit itself. This is the Ukrainian program, Freya. This is where countries like France, Germany, but also other European Union partners will be stepping in and will be helping. But then again, when it comes to NATO, you have certainly the decision-making linked to the continuous support for Ukraine. And I think it's about political messaging, but also about, of course, concrete coordination, how to move on with next month, being in the middle of the summer offensive on behalf of Russia.
All right, speaking of moving on, we're also, like we mentioned, looking at further summer offensive from Russia, but also the shifting of the Ukrainian government as well. Ursula von der Leyen has recently just visited Ukraine, and we also see a lot of coordination there as well. Do you think that the timing of this reshuffle can be a little bit unfortunate when it comes to coordination, when coordinating with foreign governments is kind of very important at this critical point in time?
Yes, I agree with you. It's, in fact, a little bit unfortunate, but at the same time, what is the right timing to do any political reshuffle in the middle of a war? it will be met with a lot of pushback, for sure, and we already saw this happening yesterday based on the reactions, for example, coming from European capitals or other international partners, specifically when it comes to the military cooperation. The last 6 months, Ukraine had now former defense minister who has built successfully on various initiatives and programs and has achieved a lot already, and it's going to be difficult to start again with a new personality. That is, of course, one important point of tension. But I think that, of course, some of the changes linked to the reshuffle are still being cautiously interpreted in the European capitals, namely for what sake they have been done. Is it more about political interest and political, let's say, domestic political games, or is it really about more efficiency and, let's say, better outcomes of governance or tackling of anti-corruption cases? Take any of the, let's say, examples from the communication, and the communication itself was also not really clear what this reshuffle is about. So there is still a lot of speculation coming from analysts and experts when it comes to this sudden, or let's say ad hoc change of the political government. And again, it's not the first one, and I suppose that it's not going to be the last one.
All right, so let's actually dive a little bit into that, because you mentioned earlier that Ukraine is perhaps bracing itself for a very difficult winter going forward. And President Zelenskyy also said the appointment of the prime minister from the energy company is perhaps in anticipation for more strikes on energy infrastructure. Can you help us understand what kind of scenario are we looking at? What does it mean that Ukraine will be facing a harsher winter? And can the replacement of the prime minister with one that managed energy realistically alleviate some of that pain?
Okay, so first, let's be clear what's happening right now. Ukraine is meanwhile able to conduct very deep strikes, drone strikes into Russian territory up to 2,500 kilometers deep into the Russian territory, attacking and successfully destroying critical and energy infrastructure, which also has contributed to the current energy crisis in Russia. And also this crisis is then having ripple effects for the war economy. But at the same time, being in the middle of a summer offense, Ukraine has faced also one of the most severe episodes of ballistic rocket attacks, and this is now a very, very weak spot. And at the same time, this, of course, is slowing down the preparation of Ukraine for a possible next winter season. That means that the appointment of the now former Naftogaz energy executive Serhiy Koretsky is supposed to prepare the country for the next such season, where the country saw the most disastrous, the most comprehensive destruction of energy infrastructure last winter season. And of course, this is a scenario that the country wants to prevent from happening this year. But again, let's be clear, there is also a political caveat behind this appointment. Serhiy Koretsky is seen actually not only as a technocrat and as an energy executive who is really aware of the problems and the challenges the country might face, but he's also seen as one of the members of the closest Zelenskyy circle. And in that sense, the expectation is, of course, that Zelenskyy will have a prime minister who will be very loyal and will be very in line with the, let's say, political directions that Zelenskyy wants to go for the months to come.
Right, so we'll have to see how that turns out. Meanwhile, coming back to Europe's rearmament, we're looking at, again, the deepening Franco-German relations, the building of more anti-ballistic missiles and long-range missiles as well. Now, there are two lines of thinking. People are saying that this perhaps is a sign that Europe is preparing for a long-term conflict with Russia, and there are other lines of thought that this perhaps is a deterrence sort of preparation, so we don't have to be in any sort of conflict with Russia. What's your take?
I belong to the second group of experts. My view is very clear and has been very clear right from the beginning of the war in 2022, and that is that Russia has attacked Ukraine because it has anticipated a weakness, military weakness on behalf of Europe and the European countries, and this weakness has to be improved. That means also that given the decisions from the NATO summit in Ankara, Europe, and that will be basically the role of the European NATO members and the European Union members in the future, it will have to take care of the conventional part of the containment towards Russia, so that there is no risk for direct military conflict between European NATO, because it's mostly about European NATO. As we know, that United States will be slowly withdrawing from the continent and will be refocusing on Indo-Pacific and China. So it's going to be the role of the European NATO members and the European Union members, and most of them are overlapping anyway, to prevent any military conflict between European NATO and Russia. And in that sense, what we need to do right now is not just to boost and speed up the rearmament, but to really fill all necessary defense gaps. This is what's happening right now. This is why you are hearing all this messaging and all this decision making related to defense budgets. But you need to consider that over the last 20 plus years, a lot of these gaps have emerged because of the lack of budget, and now they have to really speed up the process of rearmament so that this risk is as minimal as possible.
All right. Thank you so much for your input and insight. I really appreciate it. And thanks for being with us on TVP World. Cheers.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for tuning into this edition of World Talks. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.